So what we're going to talk about now is we're going to move on from even theater directly or working in theater in any capacity at all. And we're going to talk about other businesses in life. And the basis for this is a blog post that my wife came about, found online. Somehow a friend sent it to her on Facebook about 5 or 6 years ago by a gentleman by the name of Tom Vander Well. And he wrote this blog post called 10 Ways Being a Theater Major Prepared Me for Success. And Tom is a business consultant. He went into business, but his background was in theater. He studied theater in college, and he kind of minored in business. He got out of college, but he never really went into theater. He kind of went into business. He worked various jobs, and eventually he got into business consulting. He got into public speaking, getting hired in to do, various business trainings, give lectures, and stuff like that. But at one point, he wrote this blog post about 10 ways being a theater major prepared me for success. And I contacted Tom via email because I was like, a number of years ago, I wanted to teach a master class. I found his material. And so I did the respectful thing that everybody should do if you're going to literally steal somebody's ideas. I wrote him an email. I told him who I was, what I was looking to do. And he was very gracious. He wrote me back. He said, in the form of any form of educational training, at a university, classes, at a trade show, feel free to use it. He sent me a little email. I said, I'm happy for you. He says, he's had a lot of people. He says, I've had university instructors contact him that have added his stuff into the curriculum. He's like, I've never had so much response to a blog post in my life. He's like, all these theater people came out of the woodwork are like, hey, I love what you're doing. Can I teach my students? Can I use this information? And so he was very generous. On the board, I've got his website address. So it's just Tom Vander Well at worldpress.com. So that was the only thing he asked, that we tell everybody who he is, and then he's got a consulting firm, and you can find this on the web. So you can find his thing. So I'm going to go through this, and this was put together by Tom, and I want to kind of take this opportunity to talk to you about the lessons that Tom learned. And it was interesting for me because now that I'm in management and I work, international, I work corporate management, I look at it and say, this is 100% true, right? So here I am, not really working in the theater, not really working with theater people, and I can find all these points that show how my theater degree makes me more marketable than somebody else, okay? Number one, improvisation, okay? The greatest thing about the stage is that when it's live and you're up in front of an audience, anything can and does happen, right? At some point, you go to college, you're gonna do a show, and it's live. And older people that are out there, they could probably tell stories all night long about the crazy things they've seen happen during a live taping or a live performance. And you learn to deal with it, okay? That lesson, and when you're studying that in school, it's a lot. You're constantly in production, you're constantly working on shows, right? You're working with other students, other student performers, designers, student technicians, so that exponentially increases the amount of things that go wrong, because you're still learning. And you have to learn how to adapt to that. You improvise to the situation, right? If the blackout didn't happen at the end of Act 1 of The Mousetrap, you kind of have a problem because there's sort of a dead body laying on stage, and how are you going to get them off, right? You have to think, run out, throw a bag over them and drag them off. Or the guy could just get up, the dead guy can stand up and walk off. You have to improvise constantly because things happen, lines get missed, right? Set pieces don't fly in, they get stuck when they're flying in. Lighting cues skip, double go button hits happen. Not on ETC consoles, but no, they happen, right? You gotta be quick on your feet. Oh, back, hold, back. That's improvisation. That lesson of improvisation across life, your entire life is improvisation. I mean, I have dry tongue, hold on, I can't say it. Improv, I'll just say improv. That makes it easier, right? So you improv, you learn to improv. And business is about improv, especially if you're in sales and marketing type things, right? You're on your feet, you have to solve problems. Solving problems is improv, solving them effectively. Okay? Project management. We talked about project management in the form of a theatrical production, project managers at ETC, project managers at dealerships, but a stage production is basically a business project. Right? We think about project management at the dealer level. Most end users don't, because most theaters don't have a project manager. That's very much kind of this non-production career. But a project manager that's doing theater and has a theater background, all business enterprises have project managers. We have here at ETC, we have R&D project managers that manage the development process. They tend to be theater people in most cases, or at least have some form of theater background tied with R&D. We have IT, information technology, project managers that manage different IT infrastructure projects we have. If we're going to implement a new system, computer system of some sort, at ETC, there's a project manager that does that, right? And working on a theater production, it's a production. It's collaborative. You're working with people, whether it's stage management, technical direction, you have to design this, somebody's got to design it, you got to build it, you've got to manage the construction process, the budget, the labor to get it built. It's a project. And you learn all those skills in the theater when you get a technical theater degree. Even in lighting, I had to spend time my freshman and sophomore year working in the scene shop. So I had to learn about technical direction. I had to learn how to build sets. The guys that were studying technical direction or were doing master's degrees in technical direction, it's a business. There are drawings, I have to buy materials, I have to manage a labor crew, we've got to get it built, we've got to move it to the theater, we've got to set it up. This is when tech rehearsal starts, this is when final paint and set dressing is. It's a production, it's business, right? All of these things I'm talking about right now that happen in theater it's business. Theater is business. We're in it to make at least a little money, at least enough to buy food and pay for our campsite, because we don't make that much. But it's a business. And when you're younger, it's an exciting business. It's an exciting business when you're older. But as you get older, it becomes a little less, it becomes more like a job. But it's always a business, and don't lose sight of that. And those skills you learn in theater are skills that apply to any other business, okay? So that's project management. Working with a limited budget, right? Anybody done a show with a budget more than $1 million? Nobody? I thought I'd have one. No people working at rich theaters, huh? We always have a limited budget. Even if you're rich, you have a limited budget, right? Rich people will say they stay rich because they're so cheap, right? It's always the rich guy that doesn't tip the waitress well, right? You got me, I'm like a 20 to 30% tipper because my wife put us through college by waiting tables, so I always tip a lot. But we have limited budgets. Whether, theater's a lot of nonprofit theater. When you get into some of the convention centers and arts attainment type stuff, that's a lot of more for-profit, but there's always a budget, right? Even if Disney's building a theme park, there's a budget, There's X number of dollars they're willing to spend to build their theme park. And coming through college, and when you first get out of college, you're working with small theater companies, okay, your lighting budget is $50 for everything. All your gels, all your consumables. We've got the lights. You have to fix the lights. That has to come out of the $50 we give you for this show. It's a limited budget. And in theater, because we're always begging for money, because it's a lot of nonprofit, the budgets are always tight. We're always working on a limited budget. I don't know that I showed this, but what I wrote and what Tom had wrote, and I kind of paraphrased, was everybody who works on stage knows that it's not the road to fortune, right? You're not going to make the big bucks working in theater. You can make a career working in theater, right? My father's a 42-year Navy veteran. I went into the Navy, right? Military family, conservative family, Catholic family, right? I called my father after 5 years from a payphone on the docks in Charleston, South Carolina. Dad, I'm getting out of the Navy a year early. Oh, what are you going to do? What are you doing? You going to college? Yeah. What are you going to do? I'm going to art school. Right? There was kind of a pause. And my father, to his credit, said, well, can you earn a living doing that? I'm like, yeah, I think so. Okay. Now, luckily for me, with this kind of straight-laced military conservative that my father was, he grew up in southern Connecticut with one of those uncles who constantly took him to New York City to see shows, to go to Radio City. So for everything that my father was as far as a straight-laced military guy, at his core, he kind of understood theater. He kind of, yeah, of course you can, man. I used to go, there are tons of people that do theater. So I was fortunate that he understood it. But, you know, he knew I wasn't gonna get rich. I knew I wasn't gonna get rich. I wasn't going into business. I wasn't, you know, my father was a hospital administrator in the Navy. He didn't get rich doing that either. You know, there are very few careers that you can get really rich at. But we work with a budget in the theater. So that skill set in the business world, no matter what it is, what profession, that's another skill set that if you can sell yourself, if you're getting out of theater and you're applying for another job, that you can think about, wow, I've done shows and I can do a show with nothing. And that's powerful. Employers want to know that. They want to know that you can accomplish a lot with very little input, because it'll say a lot about you. There's a famous saying, and it's not just theater, it's been around for a long time, and people have applied it. We used to use it in the military, because we never thought we had enough to do whatever we need to do. It's like, we have been doing so much with so little for so long that we can now do almost anything with nothing, right? That's what we do in theater. We can make art in the smallest theater with no equipment and make it work and make people enjoy it, right? First year lighting design, you have one light, where do you hang it, right? That's how you learn lighting. That's how I learned it. You've got one light, where do you hang it? My first summer stock job, it was, okay, we've got 20 lights. Yeah, but aren't we doing the King and I? We've got 20 lights. Okay, where do I hang them? 20 lights for the King and I. And you hang them and you change color between every scene really fast. You learn that in theater. And that works in life, and that works for other businesses. Think of it as a skill you have. Even in the theater world, you know, these topics are meant to say, hey, here's how you can sell yourself to employers. Dealing with very different human beings. I love this one. I really love it, right? The theatrical community is a mashup of interesting characters. Here I am, I mean, good Lord. I grew up traveling all over the US because my father moved around all the time. And I joined the Navy, and then I went to art school, and then I did this, and I moved over to Europe for 5 years and lived in Europe, and then I moved back, and my wife stayed in Europe, and I have to travel back and forth. I live a pretty interesting life, but we work in theater. There are crazy people in theater. And it's frustrating because a lot of them are really smart. The really smart ones that are crazy just like drive you nuts, right? But we all have our quirks. That's how a lot of us ended up in theater, because we're quirky people, right? Not because we were dumb. It's a misconception. A lot of people, oh, you studied theater. You studied technical theater. I tell you what though, these things I'm talking about, what you learn, some of the best, most well-rounded people, smart people I know, and I've traveled a lot all over the world, are technical theater people. Because they have a wide body of interests. They know a lot of different types of people. They're very accepting, but there are a lot of characters, and they can fit in, right? In the theater, we have to fit in. It doesn't mean your director could be, you know, badass crazy, but he's the director. We're doing the show. The opening date is set. You got to make it work. You got to make it work with the budget. You got to make it work with the people that are assigned to the show. And theater people, you kind of learn that. You have to, or you're not going to work. Right? You have to adapt. That's a skill that translates into business, into anything you do. That's a skill that if you're in an interview, you can say, well, let me tell you what I did last. I worked on the show, and you know, we had all these different people from different parts of the country. We didn't know each other, and we had to get along, and we had to make it work. That's what business projects are, right? Dealing with difficult human beings. We understand the human condition. this one's a little hard for me. When Tom Vander Well wrote this, he was primarily an actor. He wasn't doing as much technical theater. He was kind of at a smaller college, and they kind of did everything. They did acting, and they did all the technical stuff. So in this one, understanding the human condition, we do that as designers, if you work as a lighting designer, in TDs, when you're in school. But as you move on, if you're doing if you're a board operator or you're a technical director, if you're not designing, you're probably not doing script analysis and figuring out the ins and outs of every character, but actors do, right? And when we're in college, we do. I have to do it. We did a whole half year in school on, which show? A Streetcar Named Desire. We did every character, all the analysis and everything. And after 6 months of studying A Streetcar Named Desire, one, I never want to watch A Streetcar Named Desire again. And then in the end, I boiled it down into a very simple analysis of A Streetcar Named Desire. Blanche is a moth. That's all I got to say about it. That sums up A Streetcar Named Desire. Think about it. Come discuss afterwards if you need to. But you analyze the script. You have an understanding for these different settings and scenes and people, right? And you get used to looking at scripts and interacting with all these crazy people we get to interact with and love. And a lot of people on the outside think, well, it's just fake, you're acting, or you're doing a show. But that's a mistaken impression. Because you have to really, in order to be a good actor or a good designer, you have to understand some level of reality. Even in lighting design. How many lighting designers out there? Anybody, right? One of the first things I was taught in lighting design, my sophomore year. Freshman year, everybody studied the same thing. And my sophomore year, you started your first year of whatever your specialty was. And my director of lighting design is a guy named Norman Coates. And on he got up in front of the class, and the first thing he said is, over the next 3 years, I'm going to teach you 95% of what you need to be a lighting designer. And you can all go have careers. You can do all kinds of stuff with what I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. He says, but I can't teach you to be a great designer, right? Because to be a great designer requires the other 5% that I can't teach you, right? And that's who you are as a person and what you've experienced in your life, okay? If you're designing the musical South Pacific as a lighting designer, and you've never been to the South Pacific, if you've never been to Hawaii or the Philippines or something close to the South Pacific, the quality of the light in the South Pacific is something very different. Trust me, I've seen it. It's a little different. It's just got a feel to it. And to be a great designer, right? Anybody can design South Pacific. I can section it, I can pick colors, I can write cues. But if I'm really going to make an impact as a designer, I want to capture the essence of the South Pacific. That's hard to do just by looking at pictures of the South Pacific. I have to go experience the South Pacific, right? Or I have to be really good at analyzing the script and look at lots of different paintings, pictures, photography, talk to people that have been there, right? So I'm good at thinking about that. How does it feel in the South Pacific? The first time I learned this lesson was the first time I went to Amsterdam. And I visited the house that Anne Frank, the factory where Anne Frank hid out in the Diary of Anne Frank. And in the spring and fall especially, and in Amsterdam, the light has an amazing quality to it. And it's captured, that's why the Dutch masters, right? You talk about Vermeer, Rembrandt. If you look at their paintings, they look, sometimes they seem kind of a little cloudy, they're clear, is it dirty, what is it? It's the light in Amsterdam, and it's really like that. But that's understanding the human condition. You can have empathy, you can have emotions. When we work in the arts, we work in theater, even if we're kind of hardcore, we're a TD, we do a lot of welding, at some point you had some level of passion to understand we're in the arts and we're doing theater. We do dramas, we do comedies, we do tragedies. And you have an understanding of that. And in the business world, it's important. Getting along with your fellow man, as it were, okay? So, doing whatever needs to be done. As a theater major, you all learned to do it all, right? Eventually you specialize. You go into lighting, you go into sound, acting. But we have acting, directing, producing, marketing, set design, set construction, costuming. Once again, this was written by Tom, who was in a program that was a more general theater program where they did do everything. Most of us were fortunate, or hopefully are fortunate enough to be in lighting programs that you're not just lighting, you have some opportunity to collaborate with other people. But you learn how to do a lot of different things. Because when you get your first job, there's gonna be like 2 technical people. They'll hire like, that's the lighting guy, and that's the set guy. And between the 2 of you, you do everything. And that's how you get, that's how a lot of jobs start out. And in business, it's the same thing. The more marketable you are, the more eager you are to like, oh, I can try that, I can try that, I can fill that hole. Very marketable skill that we just kind of naturally learn in theater, making difficult choices. A project, let's say we put a small thing, we're gonna do a small show to gather some support for the next big performance we're doing. And we scheduled it in a little park. We're gonna do it outside in an amphitheater, but we get up that morning, it's cold, it's windy, it's miserable. What do? Do we still do it outside? Is there a pagoda? Can we move it inside somewhere, right? This goes back to the improv thing. They're kind of tied together, making difficult choices. Sometimes if you're building something, if you're the TD, you've given a set of plans from the designer, and you're working in a scene shop, another non-production career in theater, in a scene shop, right? You're looking at, and you can't make something work. You can call the designer, you can have a discussion, but at some point, a choice is made to change the design. Or a choice is made that we have to deal with that lighting because we don't have any more budget. Or a choice is made that we're gonna cut a line out of some great piece of literature. It's like, oh, I don't know that we can do that. Sometimes you can't, depending on the copyrights, you can't change lines. Some copyrights are very specific about that. But you have to make difficult choices. A lot of times due to your limited budget and your limited staffing. We only have so many people, we only have so much money. And in the business world, it's a triangle. We have a triangle, and it applies to the theater. It applies to many things in life, right? You can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have good quality. You can pick any 2, but you can never get all 3, right? You can have it fast and you can have quality, but it's gonna cost you a lot, right? You can have it cheap and you can have it fast, but it may fall apart on you, right? But we learn that in theater. It's like we got X number of money, and that's where you have to make difficult decisions. It's always a compromise. Life is a series of compromises. Working in the theater in the collaborative environment, there are always compromises and difficult choices. Next, presentation skills, right? If I hadn't been a theater major, I could not stand in front of you. I wouldn't have this bubbly personality that I have. And that's not true. I did a lot of public speaking in high school. I used to love public speaking. It's kind of more my love of public speaking actually kind of led me to the theater and led me into acting in high school. So we didn't have any technical theater in my high school. But presentation skills, not just formal, not just standing in front of a group of people and presenting something, but design meetings, technical direction meetings, lighting staff meetings, right? In the theater, we're such a collaborative environment. Hopefully we're a positive collaborative environment. You're constantly communicating, presenting your ideas, other people have counter ideas, we're discussing it. We gotta go raise money, so okay, it's Mike's turn to go talk to the Red Hat ladies. Is that what they are? It's the Red Hat ladies. They're a social club. To raise money for our next show, talk about the cool design concept we have. That's a natural part of working in the theater, is being able to communicate. And Lord knows we can communicate. You get a group of theater people together and they're just like yak, 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 yak all night. About all, not just theater, about everything. So clearly we learn how to communicate. And communicate well, usually. Like I said, theater people tend to be smart. Hard work. Theater can be hard work. Always. Can be long hours. The show, you know, it's funny, and when you work in theater, you say, the show must go on. And we can, stupid civilian, they don't know. But in the end, the show always goes on. That's why it can be amusing. Yes, generally speaking, the show always goes on, with very few exceptions, right? If we have to work all night, the show's gonna go on, right? If the costume room caught on fire, we're probably going to go on. We'll find another way. You'll put in the hard work. In the theater, it's hard work. And in the theater, if you're not doing hard work, and it doesn't have to be hard all the time, right? It's mentally hard sometimes, it's physically hard sometimes, but it's work. And it's a collaborative you're pulling together to accomplish work, to have the show go on. And I'll tell you, in the production world, as that's where most of you will start out, if you're not doing that, you're not going to work for long. If you're not doing any of these things, you're not going to work in theater for long. You better get along with people, you better put in the work. Learn your job, be willing to help out. And when you're younger, in theory, you have more energy. You haven't become bloated as I have with a cushy office job. You should have more vigor and energy. Get involved, be interactive. This is your opportunity. That's where you make your mark. That's where you get the experience. Don't be like, oh, I'm doing electrics and that's it. Pitch in if they need help, sound needs help. TD needs help. You're working hard. And that work ethos carries over immensely into regular jobs, regular businesses, this idea of hard work. Right now, I went to a symposium a couple years ago about the millennial generation. Right? How many of you in the millennial generation? 2 of you, probably, in that generation. Every generation there's always a concern about. Right now, so that's the new generation coming in the workforce. So people that were born, just before the year 2000, there's like 5 to 7 years on either side, but the current generation is the millennial generation. I was Generation X, then there was Gen Y, and now the millennials are kind of 18, 19 years old, are entering the workforce. And it's interesting because I'm like, oh my God, I've turned into an old person because I'm like, they're lazy, they don't know what they're doing, they're not working hard enough. And that's one of the things every generation talks about. But that never happens. I've never worked with a theater major of any age. And I like to work with universities, I like to work with alumni associations before I went to school. And I've always seen a consistent dedication to work in theater and the process from theater majors. I've never had reason to doubt, that younger generation coming out of theater schools these days, they don't know what's up. For the most part, they're all good, hardworking people entering the theater industry. Because they won't work otherwise. And generally, their instructors are probably telling them that. Okay? Finally, doing the best you can with what you've got. All right? You don't always need the latest technology. Probably should take that one out. Yes, you always need the latest technology. TI by ETC. But you don't. I mean, people get the latest technology. When the money becomes available, you want the latest technology because you're probably going to keep it for a while. But across the theater, especially if you're younger, you're working at theaters, you learn to get by with what you have. I did summer stock, right? Finished freshman year of college. I'm doing summer stock. I had a great gig, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in Chatham, Monomoy Theater. This would be awesome. I was going to be the electrician and the sound engineer for shows. They're going to have a lighting designer who just did design work. And I get there and I get up to the booth, which was actually in the attic of a barn that was attached to an old house that was the theater. So it was classic summer stock. And they've got a Matrix 2-scene preset console, right? How many of you have seen? Nowadays, most college students have never seen a 2-scene preset console. So this thing had 48 channels across the top, and you would set each channel. And then for Q2, you would set the bottom row. And this one was great, because then you could record up to 3 cues in advance. So once I had the top row set, you could hit a button, which would load that cue into a short-term memory, and then I could reset that to Q3. And then I could load 2Q into memory and preset for Q4. And at that theater, I was using a Microvision FX in college, but I was like, and I was using this thing, I was like, wait, how does this work? And there was no manual, but I had to figure it out. I had to work hard. I had to use the technology that was supplied to me, right? And I had to use this 2-scene preset console. I thought it was insane. And at the same time, because I didn't know what it's summer stock, right? They sold it like, this is gonna be the best experience. Over here, there's the stage. Here's my Matrix 2 scene preset. Over here, 2 reel-to-reel machines with a crossfader, right? And I did the mousetrap, and it was like we had all these sounds. So I'm like trying to run lighting cues and sound effects at the same time. And the stage manager sat in front of me when the lights went to the stage. In his shorts and because it was hot. It was like 120 degrees, and it wasn't air conditioned. With ice, we'd have little fans with ice in front of them, try to stay cool. And I loved it. It was a great way, but it wasn't the latest technology. We had to work really hard. We had to make difficult choices because we could only hang lights in certain places. It was all these things. We jobbed in some actors. We had a resident staff, resident troupe, I guess would be the theater term for it. But then we'd bring in some names for some of the bigger roles that were some interesting characters. And it was a great experience. I keep in touch with a lot of those people. I worked with them one summer, and throughout my career, I've constantly run into some of them. But that training, when I came into management, became really important. Because then I went to Europe to work, and I had to work with different cultures, different types of people, different ways of thinking about stuff, okay? So that's the 10 ways that your theater degree helps you. Does anybody have anything to add? Do you have an 11th way? No 11th way? Well, thanks for coming to my presentation. I'm around, I'm teaching this class 2 more times at Q. I'm around today. I've got my little stamp for stamping passports. So, thank you very much.